The following was recorded in front of a live studio audience at the Studio 21 Podcast Café. This is the United Podcast Network.
Welcome to the Writer's Block Podcast NH. This is a podcast designed by writers for writers on the journey to being published. Joined Mandra Viscornet.
It was so healthy and nutritious.
Deborah Monk.
Can we open each podcast with a dance number?
Shelley Devlin.
It was so full of inspiration and sparkles.
Every Tuesday morning live on YouTube. And make sure you subscribe to catch the podcast anytime on iTunes, iHeartRadio, Podbean, Spotify, or your favorite podcast catcher. It's time to be inspired, feel empowered, and be well with the Writer's Block Podcast NH.
And welcome to the Writer's Block Podcast. I'm Mandra.
I'm Debbie.
And I'm Shelley.
Thank you for joining us, where our mission is to inspire, empower, and help people be well. Today on the Writer's Block Podcast, we welcome back Martha Stavrou, a creative writing instructor at the New Hampshire Institute for Art, and she's here to talk about memoir writing with us.
Yes, and I'm so excited.
Me
so
too.
excited. Because everybody's been telling us we need to read more and we need to write more. And the thing is, memoir. Why memoir? Why are we all writing memoir? Why has there been a resurgence of the genre? Or I think there's been a resurgence.
Oh, absolutely. I agree.
Why do you think?
You know what? I honestly am not 100% sure, but I think we all have moments in our life that we want to share with others. And the incredible thing about this world is we're all humans. There's a lot of diversity, but underneath all of that, we are still so closely connected and we still experience a lot of the same things, but our perspective is very different. And so to write about that and to read it, really, I find reading memoirs, I don't know if I could ever write one, but I love reading them because I always find something I can connect
like a universal
right.
There is always a
thread in there.
Well, that's if it's a good book.
Yeah.
They do that.
Yep.
Now, I think back when I first originally fell in love with books was when my grandmother would take me to the Arlington Public Library. And it was like this castle. And we would walk up and my little legs would climb the step. And then I'd have to walk 6 to be able to reach the next stair. And my grandmother would often get autobiographies. And she would get ex-presidents and, Margaret Thatcher.
Yeah.
And I was not drawn to those. Now
That's different.
Right. Why? What? I don't know that we had memoir back then.
I'm sure we did because I was reading a book on memoir last night and they mentioned Nabokov. So, I'm sure that there were memoirs. They were just different.
Well, and what do you think a memoir is today?
A memoir today, compared to, say, older memoirs, they're more, to me, they read more like fiction. I don't know if you've read Educated yet by Tara Westover, but oh my gosh, if you haven't.
You started it?
I started it.
Did it draw you in?
It drew me in and then, life happened
Right.
and then I had to set it down.
Yeah. I just, any second, I carried that with me everywhere I went, any second I had to read it. She had an incredible ability to draw you into her landscape, draw you into her environment, and just inform you about her father's mental state without spelling it out. She didn't know what bipolar was, but all of his behaviors were just so bizarre, and so no one would put their 7-year-old daughter in that position. Why is he doing it?
Right.
And then repeat it over and over again with all his children. So she uses a lot of elements of craft that you find in fiction. And it's such a crossover now. And I'm not saying that memoir is identical to fiction, but the craft elements that you use in fiction are the same ones that I would have my students use in their memoirs.
It's more of a storytelling technique.
It is. It's exactly
a story
storytelling.
Is a story, right.
And
the story just happens to be true.
Exactly. And you're not bound by facts in the same way that, say, an autobiography is, they still did fact checking for Tara Westover's book, but she changed the names of some of her family members.
And does she say that in the beginning?
Yeah, she says it in the back. Actually, I read that book literally, there's that word, from cover to cover, because she had so much to offer even after her story was done, talking about her story. And where was I?
Well, we were just saying,
checkers.
I almost feel like memoir now is if autobiography and self-help had a baby, I feel like that's what memoir is now.
See, that's what I was just saying.
Yes.
Like, that I'm on the memoir self-help track with my book.
Right. And
So-
I think, do you think a lot of the books are? Like if you think about Wild and you think about Eat, Pray, Love.
Yes, yes, because we're all searching for a truth, our inner truth. We're all, in fact, when earlier I said I wouldn't write a memoir, I have actually started thinking about one, because you want to understand yourself more, and you want to understand where you came, and then the best way to understand yourself more is to know and pick through where you came from, and that means all the good, the bad, and the really ugly.
Right.
So
Because can you imagine a memoir? I was born, my parents loved me. I went to high school.
That was kind of Nabokov's. Actually.
He had a great life?
He had a great life. He lived a very, he had a very great life as almost Russian kind of royalty. So from what I gathered, I haven't read his memoir, so I really can't.
So it's a fairy tale
So,
memoir.
but it is kind of it's a very walking on the sunny side of the street kind of thing. But what this particular writer got out of his memoir was the language that he used and the way that he described things. So that was really what was so compelling to her. Not so much his life. He had a very charmed life from the sounds of it, but he was an incredible writer. But there were also things that were revealed, she said, through the narrative that, he was obviously a very selfish, kind of self-absorbed guy, but the way he wrote about it was just fabulous.
So
Interesting.
what do you think if someone's going to start a memoir? What do you think they should? Because the three of us, well, Mandra's more on track, but Shelley and I we've started memoirs and we've meandered this way and meandered that way. What do you think
taken a long road.
Yeah, the journey.
It's okay. It's a journey.
No, I'm okay with that. I'm okay that I'm on my fourth draft, but it's all right. Shelley's a little more. She would really like to have some structure. What do you think you should know? Because, everybody has interesting stories. And I don't think it can be as simple as, well, I had some interesting things happen to me, so I think I'll write a book.
No, you really have to come at it with, I think, a specific memory. There's always a pivotal point in our life, I think, where we do something, we act or something happens to us. And that's kind of the starting point.
Oh, see,
and
I
again,
would have thought. Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I would have thought it was the message, and you're saying no.
No.
Oh, really? That's
I would
great,
not
because I don't know what my message is. Do you?
You know what? A lot of the times you don't know what your message is until you're
finish.
deeper into it.
It we're
really,
deep. We're both deep. We're deep.
One of the things, one of the exercises that I have planned for my students.
Yes, we should say that. Is your class still open? Can people still sign up?
It is full. Thank
Your
you very
class
much.
is full.
I am so thrilled to say that too.
Congratulations. That's great.
My fiction classes, I'd have 3 or 4 students, and cutoff was 10. They actually let 11 in. Because you do, sometimes lose someone. Their schedule
That's a nice
changes or
small
whatever.
class.
But it's
a good size.
It's a good
Yeah.
size for 3 hours because it gives. I'll have enough time to pay attention to everybody's work.
Right.
Because I will always probably have them do an exercise or a prompt because that's why you're there. And I want them to leave the class feeling the same way they leave Writer's Night Out, so to speak, is inspired and juiced up and ready to write. So one of the exercises I kind of have planned is for them to just sit quietly for about 10 or 15 minutes and draw on a memory that they have that they can really infuse with details, and just to write about something that happened to them. That's something pivotal. And don't worry about, letting your reader know what year it is or any of the details about how you got to this point, but try to infuse it with as many details as you can. So don't put the pressure on yourself so much to, start at the beginning. You're never going to start at the beginning. In any critique I've done with anybody, their beginning is always further in. So you just start writing. Just let your mind go. Draw on your all your sensories, whatever you taste, smell, sound, sight,
We should
color.
do a show on that. Oh wait,
Yep.
we did.
Yeah,
On the five senses.
So and kind of that's where you begin. You never begin at the beginning because you don't quite always know where your beginning is until you're a little further in.
Well, it's like
see,
any
and
good
then-
story. You start telling the story and then you go,
Yeah.
you know what? This needs a little more context. Let me
Yes.
let me back up a little bit.
Yeah.
But so let's say that you managed to come up with some great stories. How do you put them together?
You find a good editor. No.
Oh God.
But you do. You find someone find someone who will read your mess, because you're always you're gonna start off with
Mess.
at least I do anyways, a pile of a hot mess of stories.
Okay, so check. Shelley and I are good.
Yes, you
we've
have your
got-
messes. You've got the mess.
But if
Pages and pages of
Yeah.
mess.
So one of my strengths is structure. So I started writing a piece about my father who passed away a few years ago, and all the events that kind of surrounded it. My structure was fine, but everything else was kind of like, So for me, it was almost kind of I had to go backwards. But I have a pile of hot mess fiction that's got no quite starting point. So it's different depending on what you're writing on. But yeah, if you could find someone, you guys could swap. You read hers, okay, or maybe
We've done
not.
that.
Oh, they've done that.
We've done it.
We've done
What, was
that.
it
Done
ugly?
it.
Was it not a good idea?
Oh no, that's
I think it was a good idea.
good idea.
Well, I don't know.
But yeah.
I'm trying. I'm trying to think of Shelley. You haven't done mine. Finish my damn book, would you, woman?
I have read your book.
You've read it. No, I know, but finish writing it for me.
Oh, finish writing it
Yes.
for you.
That would be. I think it would be so
A collaborative
That
effort.
would be two different voices.
It would be
Yes,
so
that'd
different.
be
Yes,
very
two different voices.
So unless you're going to do a book 1, book 2, you're going to kind of throw your reader off.
Right.
Voice is very
Yeah.
important.
We have that down too. Book 1, book 2.
Yeah, we do. You do.
They have 2 books not written.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've got 2 books not written also. Well, sort of, yeah. In
What
the
are
drawer.
what are some other elements that people should pay attention to in memoir writing?
And one of the elements because Martha and I were talking on the phone beforehand, one of the elements that she mentioned that I thought no one else has talked about is timestamps.
I'm curious about that one as well.
Well, yeah, it's kind of slang for basically grounding your reader in the period that
Right.
you're, and you can do that through, you can open your chapter 1997 and they're going to know,
Right.
but you're going to want to go a little further than that because you're going to want to, if you're in the 80s, throw a little Wham in there. Was Wham the 80s or?
Wham was certainly the 80s.
Yeah. So Wham, you can
cassette
drop
recorder
music,
or
hairstyles, clothing.
Aquanet.
Yes, exactly.
I'm stealing that one.
Yeah, the Aquanet.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Of course, that works for you.
Jumbo size Aquanet. Yep. So things like that.
So use the details to set.
Details are so important in every element. You're talking about landscape, language, time-stamping, the period you're drawing your reader. Just grounding your reader in your story all boils down to details.
Well, and because of our conversation, my novel, Well Behaved One Coming Undone, goes back and forth between Mel and Jodi's point of view.
Right.
And so I have it says, right at the beginning, Mel, and then it says Jodi.
Yep.
Well, quite a few people said to me, I wanted to do different fonts in the different chapters. And both of my editors and my formatter really insisted that was amateur, even though I found Jodi Picoult had done it, my idol. So they talked me out of doing it. But then I had readers come up to me afterwards and tell me that they got confused. It took them a while to realize they were in someone else's point of view. So now that I'm working on my memoir, I go back and forth between today and yesterday. And because of our conversation, I thought maybe that isn't clear enough either. Maybe they're not going to see today or see yesterday. So now what I'm thinking about doing is putting in between the time changes a description of each dance. So yesterday I wrote, Cha-cha, a cocktail of lightning, courage, and joie de vivre. Shaken, not stirred. So that would be on its own page, and then you would switch to a different time, and it would still say today. But I thought that break of reading, prose, I thought that was, and nobody has mentioned timestamps. Is that an example of a timestamp?
Yeah.
It's helping transition?
If it's helping you transition into another time, and I guess, maybe I use timestamp. That's just like, I guess, I don't even know where I got it from, but I'm sure there's a more correct way to say it, when you're talking about literature. But basically, timestamps are just things that remind the reader what year they're in.
Yeah.
Or where they,
And that was
basically
a problem for me, because I switched back and forth a bit from sort of a more present to a past leading up. And I think there was some confusion on where the reader was.
Yeah.
But I might be able to do a more kind of literal timestamp of, winter 2000, whatever.
Yeah. There's also, in Tara Westover's memoir too, she telescopes time. So she, will jump far ahead, like from 7 years old, and suddenly she's, she's 10 or 12 or 14. And so.
And that's educated?
And that's educated. Okay. The book Educated. So that's also done, she does that so deftly with, just comments about, she should be in a certain grade. She never set foot in school until she was 17 years old, I think, something like that. So it was a really, really strange environment to any one of us, but the way that she grounds you in each time in her life, it's almost something I can't describe. You have to read it, but she uses the elements of craft so deftly. It's amazing. It's just an incredible book.
So timestamps, I do think that's a really important part of memoir, especially.
It's so important.
Because most likely you will be switching times.
Yes.
If you're not going to do the straight chronological.
Right.
Yeah, you're going to need to help the reader so they don't become confused where they're at.
Exactly.
So that was one of the, and then you mentioned landscape.
Yeah.
As a craft of fiction that is also applicable in.
Well, imagery and landscape. So, grounding your reader in an environment. I mean, again, I'm going to go back to Tara Westover because she just did it so incredibly. The way I just pictured this muddy, like junkyard. She had this incredible way of describing her family's home and the environment she worked in with these heavy equipment and lots of sharp edges and, very dangerous for a child. And yet she was running around in it, and her brothers and her sisters were all running around in it, wet, muddy, bloodied,
Wow.
So she used the landscape to set you right in her.
Yeah, and it kind of, what she was experiencing as a child in that landscape was what she was kind of experiencing emotionally as well.
Right. The sharpness.
The unpredictability and the slipperiness and the just, the bursts of fire that, it was just such a dangerous environment. It was, I was like, oh my God, someone's going to die, and no one. Well, I won't ruin it.
Right,
for
don't
you.
ruin it.
Shelley still has to read it.
It's just a phenomenal book. I just, it's one of those books you're just not going to want to put down. And then when it's one of those books that's like,
you're sad.
You don't want it to be over, right?
So is that your favorite memoir?
So far, yeah.
So far?
But I also read The Tender Bar by J.R. Moehringer, which was kind of, it was really kind of a fun but sad book too at the same time. But that was a really interesting book. And what I thought was, another thing I tell people writing about their past is you want some emotional distance from it. Because it's very hard. You really have to.
We all know that.
You have to be willing to throw yourself under the bus just as quickly as you're going to throw anybody else out, because your reader has to trust you. And so they're not going to believe you if you are the most pious, wonderful person in your book. It's just not going to fly. Sorry. Right. We're all humans. We all have faults. so your reader has to trust you. So you have to be willing to really delve in and get ugly. And I think Tara Westover is in her 30s, and a lot of this happened in her early youth,
Right,
but
so she
even
had a
right
little
up
distance,
she had a
but-
little distance. But even towards the end, when her parents come to visit her at Harvard, when she's at Harvard, that was probably pretty recent for her. But I think that she had dealt with so much of her childhood. But at that point, she was kind of like, okay, I know this avenue. I've been down it before. J.R. Moehringer is the Tender Bar. He is my age, I think, and a lot of what happened to him was, 20, his childhood, like 7 years old on up to about his 20s, and how he started his writing career. And he was basically raised in a bar, and then, to
the
some
Tender
degree.
Bar.
The Tender Bar, yeah. So his uncle was a bartender in a bar in Manhasset. But that was another. It was just like, you get his characters, the way he develops his characters are just hilarious. I mean, I've worked in bars, so I know exactly the type of people he's talking about. But these are all guys that basically took care of him and looked out for him. He was raised by a single mother, and he lived with his grandfather off and on. Him and his mother did. And his grandfather was not a fatherly person, not even to his own kids. So, where he was constantly looking for that, paternal guidance that he did not have when he was younger. But that was another riveting journey, and the way he developed the characters was incredible. And he also kind of fact-checked his own stuff.
You say develop the characters,
but they're real people,
right?
But
They still have to be developed.
They still have to be developed, and
Right.
he did walk around with a notebook and write down a lot of funny things. And I have stacks of notebooks at home. I've done the same thing. So he would go back, but there's can I swear?
Jonathan, can we swear?
There's
Your show.
There's a character called a fuckum babe. One of the characters in the bar, and he is just the way he talks. If you visualize in a book, the way he jams his sentences together, exactly how he's talking. He's running
like just
his
a
words all
run-on
together.
sentence.
Yeah, so
like
he
no
was
breath
running all his words, and then I'm not sure. I think it's fucking babe who's always talking to a mouse in his pocket. So he's tilting his head down, talking to himself, and it's just you can just picture him perfectly. And he's one of my favorite characters in the book. It's hilarious. I mean, again, the elements of craft.
So
character, language,
Landscape, imagery,
timestamping.
timestamps. Just one more question. How about stream of consciousness? How much does that belong in a memoir?
I don't think it necessarily. I think it's a tool to getting yourself to memoir.
What does that mean?
Stream of consciousness is basically just sitting down and just we call it vomiting on the page. Is what we called it in grad school because you were under so much pressure to write. You just to sit down and have 15, 20 minutes to prep your mind and just kind of go with it. And it's like, no, you didn't have that. You better get it down and turn it in quick. So it's a great tool. I think it was like I said in the beginning, find a memory, find a place in time or something within what you've already got that is kind of the nugget, or that you feel is the nugget of where you're starting, and start there and just sit down in a quiet room if you have one. I only have it when my husband and my kids are gone, and just let it go. Just write and write and write, and then
And then what do you do with it?
You bring it to the writers group.
Okay.
Put it away. Yeah.
You bring it to the writers' night out, April 1st.
Put it away for a little bit, but you know what? That's an idea for
a whole nother show.
Absolutely. So.
Well, thank you, Martha, so much for coming on again
Thank
and
you so
talking
much for
about
having
memoir writing. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you all for listening, and thank you to the Studio 21 Podcast Café. Please check out the Writer's Block NH Facebook. And if you'd like to hear this episode again, you can head on over to, the United Podcast Network.tv. You can find this episode and all previous episodes at the United Podcast Network.tv. May you be inspired, feel empowered, and be well.
The views and opinions expressed by the hosts, guests, or callers of this program do not necessarily reflect the opinions of the Studio 21 Podcast Café, the United Podcast Network, its partners, or affiliates.